The idea of al-Bawsala came from the idea of creating a counter power while we were creating the power here in Tunisia. So during the October 23rd elections, I had the idea with a couple of friends of monitoring this Constituent Assembly. The main idea was to lobby for rights and freedoms in the Constitution, but then we found ourselves working on rights and freedoms, but also on transparency and accountability. Monitoring the Assembly, the Constitution, means monitoring the people writing the Constitution, but also the process of the Constitution, and the most important was to monitor what is written in the Constitution. So this is what we've done. How? We started by collecting every information and tried to get this access to the committees, and that was a very difficult part because the committees were close to the public. And then we asked for every document that the Assembly releases and that should be given to the public. But after 4 or 5 months, we discovered one thing, and one quite shocking thing, which was it's the first time Tunisia has a democratic parliament, and it was the first time that right in the Constitution we discussed with each other's the future and the present of Tunisia, and with that many MPs were absent and they were not attending the sessions. And one problem was that it was quite shocking not to see that MPs are not attending the sessions. But the second thing, and this is what was the most dangerous part, is that this rate of absentees has an impact on the Constitution, which means most of the people who were absent were from the progressist part of the Assembly, and of course they were like criticizing why we are writing a conservative constitution, and actually it's just because they were absent, and so they didn't vote for the article. So why criticizing an article when you're not there? Surprisingly, the topics that were shared by international media weren't those who were, where the real fight was. For example, one of the most important topics, and the topic that made the MPs having lots of work, was about independence of justice. And at the same time, people were talking about Sharia. So, of course, we had problems with Sharia, women's rights, freedom of expression, right to conscience, freedom of belief. But it wasn't only that. That was these topics were interesting for international media. But the other two major topics were what power will we have? Will it be a parliamentary regime or a presidential regime or a mix, what we have now? And the second one was independence of justice and how the justice should work. They decided to arrive to a compromise because people were fed up with this assembly and couldn't wait longer. They decided to do this compromise also because we lost 2 people during this process, which were Brahmi and Balaid. Brahmi, he was an MP. And so, the MPs saw themselves taking the country into a hole, and we were going to reach this point of not being able to return back, And it became very dangerous for the transitional process in Tunisia to continue this assembly, to continue all these political fights between everyone. And so they decided to create this committee of consensus And without this committee, I can see how we would have written this constitution. Yeah, Egypt had a huge impact on the process in Tunisia. I'm always telling my friends in Egypt that the only ones who want something from the Egyptian movement was Tunisia, because actually you see the mess that we're seeing in Egypt. Egypt today is a dictatorship. It's a fact. But what happened is that our Islamists were very afraid to see the same scenario here, and at the same time the opposition used it in a good way, which means they weren't really blackmailing the Islamists, saying we will put you back to jail, but they were, see how we are democratic and how we are not trying to take the power by illegal ways and by a coup. And so that was very interesting, because our Islamists and our progressists, both of them didn't didn't fall into the trap, and they took good lessons from Egypt, and it was very clear that this Egyptian scenario should not be. And actually, we were the only source of information coming from the assembly. No one in Tunisia can know how an MP voted if we weren't there. We were the only one who were attending all the committees, every plenary session from the beginning until the end. So basically during 2 years and a half, the media, all the media, whether it's mainstream or not, they had only one source of information, which was us. Because what we do, even if we work on lobbying, etc., these are separated projects. So Marsad is really only about information, 100% information. We don't give our ideas about an article or comments. It's just the information as it is. And so that helped a lot every media to use it. So how was it actually? How we knew that we were partnering with media? It's not because we wrote papers, but because, for example, when there is an important vote, we see all the media talking about the results of the voting, and of course they were not citing and saying, quoting us. They were like, that MP voted against that article, but we know if they have that information, it's because we published it. So this was the biggest part of the partnership with media. But at the same time, we had real partnership with Mosaic FM, which is the biggest radio here. And so they were inviting us into their big show, midi show. We were sending them information so they can give it to the public. We were also a lot invited by the national television to many shows, talk about the constitution, what is happening, how it is, which are the powers, how is going the consensus, etc. And so this is what we did with media. Then civil society. With civil society it was different. Actually our biggest disappointment was that we were expecting a more active civil society in the constitutional period. And unfortunately, there were very few NGOs in the assembly trying to lobby the MPs, etc. So with civil society, they had the information, and we worked mostly with international civil society. We gave our comments about the constitution with the Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, and the Carter Center. And we worked with experts, law experts, etc. With the MPs, most interesting part, during 2 years and a half, we saw a complete revolution in the minds of the MPs. Because when we started working on this, they were like questioning what is our legitimacy to be in the assembly for them. We were like, who are you? We are the elected people. Who are you? And we were always saying, we are Tunisian people. You are the elected, but we are. I mean, your power comes from us. So we have, I would say, even more legitimacy than you. And it was quite a fight in the beginning. It was very difficult. And then during the constitutional period, I mean, when they started voting for the articles one by one, all of them were supporting us. All of them were, when the president of the assembly in his speech after the constitution said thank you to civil society, all the MPs looked to us and most of them said Bawsala, Bawsala. So because even for them, and this is something that people don't know here in Tunisia, is even for them it was very difficult to get the information. And most of them, they got the information through us. And so during the voting article by article for the constitution, when they voted for an amendment and they were waiting to vote for the article and they needed the results to see who voted for and who voted against, they were like, please give us the results. And we were doing the results, live to give it to them, to work on it, etc. We were preparing their arguments, giving them studies about comparative law. For example, when they wanted to limit the right to demonstration, they wanted to limit the right to demonstration, where we did like a study on the right to demonstrate in all the countries. How is it in the constitution? Why you can't limit it in a constitution, etc. And so every time they were thinking about an article and they needed materials, we were working on these materials, giving them to them, because they don't have any support. 99% of the MPs don't have staff. They work by their own. You don't even have Wi-Fi in our assembly, so we were giving them our own Wi-Fi. And so, in the beginning, for them, monitoring was monitoring against them. And in the end, they understand that it was for them too. For now, while we're doing the interview, I'm looking to the live tweet of our Twitter account, because there are two committees in meeting now, which are the Financial Committee and the Electoral Law Committee. And we are there to monitor what is happening and what they are doing. So this is not an NGO that monitors the constituent assembly or the constitution. We monitor everything coming from the parliament. And this is why Marsad, the parliamentarian Marsad will stay with all, I hope, the next parliaments in Tunisia. But also we created two other Marsads, which are Marsad of the municipalities and Marsad, which we call Marsad local, and Marsad of the executive, and we're going to monitor all the finance, everything which is financial.